Welcome to another episode of the Trigger Discipline Podcast. I'm your host, Nick. As a concealed firearm carrier, you've decided that you're willing to defend the lives of not only yourself, but friends, family, and even strangers. While most people train and prepare themselves for a gunfight, it's just as important to train for the aftermath as well. Ideally, in a gunfight, the attacker would be the only person sustaining injuries. However, there's a good chance that you or another innocent person in your vicinity will be shot. Knowing the ins and outs of tactical medicine is a must for not only this scenario, but many others. On this episode, we've invited Shawn Whittington to discuss tactical medicine. Welcome to the show, Shawn. Let's start off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm a firefighter and paramedic with the Omaha Fire Department, 20 years this year with them. Prior to Omaha, I worked for Council Bluffs Fire for 4 years before that. And then for 4 years before that, I was in private EMS. I've been a licensed paramedic since 96. Worked 6 years as a tactical medic in early 2000s. Omaha Fire had a program, and we provided close medical support to Omaha, Douglas County, and Sarpy County SWAT teams. I'm also a certified law enforcement officer in the state of Nebraska, and currently I work in the fire investigation unit for the Omaha Fire. I'm also a senior instructor with 88 Tactical, and I'm the program director for the Tactical Medicine series of classes and also the Primal Defense series of classes.
Awesome. Sounds like we got the right guy on to talk about what we need to talk about tonight. So I guess the first thing is a lot of people probably have, you'd hopefully think that a lot of people would have at least a first aid kit, and a lot of people probably think that's enough. But in lieu of a tactical medicine trauma kit, can you start off by explaining the basic differences between a first aid kit and a trauma kit?
Sure. When I think of a first aid kit, I think of just something that's for minor things, cuts, scrapes, little burns and things like that. So typically something you'd buy at Walgreens or something like that. So, Band-Aids and such. So something that's just minor, not life-threatening. Now the difference between that and, for instance, a trauma kit, it's kind of the definitions in the name. It's for something serious. It's for something life-threatening, and for some type of injury that you're going to need to see a doctor for, probably a surgeon as well.
So I guess if some people like I said, some people only carry their first aid kit. Is it appropriate to, is it ever appropriate just for someone to carry a first aid kit? And if so, at a bare minimum, what should that consist of?
Well, one's not a replacement for the other, I would say. So what you need is a combination of the two, in my opinion. It's, so basic first aid kit, stock with a bunch of Band-Aids. Most of the time when I do training on the range, I've used a tourniquet on an actual firing range. I've probably given out 10,000 Band-Aids during classes. So lots of Band-Aids, some 4x4s, some gauze pads, tape. You're talking, antiseptic wipes. You could sunscreen. I've given away a lot of sunscreen also. People tend to forget that. And you could have, Neosporin type anti-itch creams. Sometimes I'll stock anti-diarrheals and things like that, and get someone, we're an hour away from a convenience store or something like that, and someone's having a little gastrointestinal distress. That's kind of nice to be able to give to somebody to help them out a little bit. So that's, again, kind of first aid kit. That's what I would consider that. Now for a trauma kit, a tourniquet. When I recommend tourniquets, the only tourniquets that I recommend for anybody to use are those that are approved by the TCCC and tech committees. And those are the committees responsible for doing the research and making recommendations for the military and the type of medical equipment that they carry. And so tourniquets off of their list, any of those are going to be good to use. Some type of a combination bandage is a good idea. And what I mean by a combination bandage is a bandage that where say like, if you took a 4x4 and an ace wrap and wrapped it around somebody's arm, put a couple pieces of tape on it, that would actually work. That would be just fine. But a combination bandage is that, but it's already assembled for you. So it's going to come out of the package. It's got the dressing and the are all one piece. It goes on really quickly, and then it'll have a couple of clips at the end. You can secure it, and much easier to use under a stressful situation. Recommend some gloves, some nitrile gloves, trauma shears, some extra sticky tape is a good idea. Chest seals, commercial chest seals, and if you can afford it, some hemostatic gauze.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing is like, you look into it, what you go online and you're looking at what everybody's recommending, and pretty soon you have a full paramedics bag in the back of the vehicle. I mean, like, day-to-day situations, like, I'm not always going to be going to the range, but I'm not always going to be doing something where all I'm going to get is a paper cut. You mentioned like a combination of the two kits. Like, what would you, if someone's doing something non-dangerous, like what would you recommend as that combination kit?
Yeah, now it's kind of hard. Like I say, you're right. You can't carry everything all the time, and I don't either. I usually try to have a couple of options. Again, depending on what I'm doing, you kind of do a personal risk assessment. How dangerous is where I'm going or what I'm going to be doing, and what should I have with me. Usually in my vehicle, I'll carry both. Kind of more extensive kits in my vehicle. I'll have a good stocked first aid kit, and then I'll have basically a trauma kit, but with some extra items in it. So if I need more, I can go back to I can always grab more from my vehicle if I have the opportunity. As far as what I'm going to carry with me, I utilize a couple options. I have an ankle kit that I'll use for when I'm wearing long pants. That actually works really well. I was a little skeptical of it at first, but actually it's fairly comfortable, and you kind of forget about it after a while. And then that ankle kit, what I'll have a tourniquet, some hemostatic gauze, a couple of a compact chest seal, and then a kind of an elastic wrap that you can improvise a bandage with. And that's all I'll have in that kit. Now, if I'm wearing shorts, that's obviously not an option. So I've got a kind of almost the same thing. I wrap a couple of rubber bands around it and stick it in cargo. And that works pretty good. If I can't carry that, I've got a small carrier I can belt for just a tourniquet. At a minimum, I'll try to have at least a tourniquet with me. So kind of in stages, again, depending on how I'm dressing and where I'm going. I don't carry all that stuff everywhere. I'm probably maybe not the best example of a tech mid guy, because I don't carry it all the time everywhere. But
you have more stuff than most people probably are carrying anyway. So,
but certainly when I'm doing, again, what I consider higher risk activities, if I'm at a gun range, I've got some gear on me, and I've got a medical kit, within reach in my bag. If I'm going to a mall, a school, a movie theater, I've got my gun on me, and I've got a few pieces of medical kit with me also. So again, you kind of, every person has to make their own determination on, what you're willing to carry, when you're willing to carry it. And that's what seems to work for me. And if I could, maybe just to add on, about some of that gear.
Yeah. Go for it.
There are places that have stock kits that you can get, that are generally perfectly adequate. At 88, we kind of put our own kits together, and North American Rescue is our primary distributor or manufacturer we get most of our stuff from. And so I recommend when you do buy any type of medical kit, especially for your trauma kit, get it from either the manufacturer directly or an authorized representative of that manufacturer, because there are counterfeit tourniquets out there and things that, if you're paying $5 or $10 for a cat tourniquet, that's not a cat tourniquet. It's a Chinese piece of crap. And I'm not going to bet my life for anybody else's life. And so tourniquets cost a certain amount of money, $25 to $35 they cost, period. Doesn't matter where you buy them from. And now those cheap ones are great for practice. If you want to buy one of those $5 Chinese knockoffs for practicing with, I don't have a problem with that at all, but that's not for putting on actual people. The other thing is the nitrile gloves. A lot of the commercial kits we see black nitrile gloves. Well, the problem with those black gloves, you don't see blood on them, especially in low light. They just look wet. And so, you do a blood sweep on somebody with those gloves, it's like, and you look at it, they just look wet. Is it blood? Is it sweat? Is it urine? I don't know. So we don't recommend using things for any type of patient treatment. So get blue, it's going to contrast.
Yeah, that's a good point, because when it comes to gloves, the only thing I've ever really thought about is you're just protecting your hands essentially from any sort of airborne pathogen or anything like that. But I like that. Yeah, use something that's light colored. Don't try to be cool. Use the black gloves.
Yeah, run around your basement, play Navy SEAL, put your black nitrile gloves on. But when you leave the house, again, that can be an issue. The other thing is hemostatic gauze. There's different brands of hemostatic gauze, and they do different things. I shouldn't say that. They end up doing the same thing, but they do it in different ways. And one may be a better choice for you than the other. This is something that we find a lot of people are not really educated about. Quick clot combat gauze, that's one of the most common hemostatic agents that you hear about. And if you're not aware of what a hemostatic agent is, it's a product designed to promote clotting, so you gain faster control over massive bleeding. So it just helps you to control bleeding faster. And quick clot, how it works is the TCCC committee, they recommend the gauze form because you can get it in granules, you can get it in pads and sponges. They recommend the gauze product. And that particular gauze is impregnated with a mineral called kaolin. And when kaolin comes into contact with human blood, in a nutshell, it accelerates the clotting process and helps your body to form a clot faster. Now, the problem with quick clot is if that blood chemistry is altered, for instance, by blood thinning drugs, it doesn't work very well. Now, combat gauze, that's the product the military uses, and it works perfectly fine on healthy soldiers that aren't taking blood thinning drugs. The product that we recommend, if you're just the average person putting a kit together that you may use on another average person, is Celox. Celox, how it works is that gauze is impregnated with a polymer extracted from shrimp shells. And when it comes into contact with human blood, it actually forms a clot separate from your blood. So it's not affected by blood chemistry at all. So that's that's why we recommend that product, and that's what we stock in our particular kits, because it's going to be more effective on a wider range of people.
You don't have to be worried about any allergies to shellfish. I think you brought that up in the training video.
Yeah, that's a great question, and you don't, because I don't know all the science behind it, but the allergies is to the meat itself, and this is extracted from the shell, this polymer, and so there's never been a reported allergic reaction to Celox, even when used on people with severe shellfish allergies. So that's not an issue.
Cool. Another thing, like, you obviously want to know how to use all these things before use all these tools in your kit before the emergency situation happens. Some of these things can be used, without essentially ruining them. And some of them, the second you open up the package, you've ruined them. Can you go in depth a little bit about what items in your trauma kit you can actually use in practice and put right back in your bag?
Yep, that's a good question. And occasionally I'll get the question, what's the most important piece of gear that I need to carry? And I'm going to tell you, well, the most important thing isn't anything that you're going to carry. It's the knowledge between your ears. And, we don't expect anybody to be at a paramedic level, but a few hours of professional training on assessment, treatment, and how to use this stuff, everybody should do that. If you're going to carry this stuff, not just watching YouTube videos, actually go and find a professional class and get some real training on it. I forgot the question. I'm sorry. What was it?
That's all right. What are some of the tools that you can take out and practice with and put back in your kit?
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm getting old. Alzheimer's is kicking in or something. But yeah, so there's certain tourniquets that manufacturers tell you do not practice with if it's your first line piece of kit. CAT tourniquets, the combat application tourniquet, for instance, North American Rescue says that your duty tourniquet is your duty tourniquet. It's not to be practiced with. Now, I got a whole box of CAT tourniquets that we've got thousands of repetitions of putting on actual people. And, are they still effective? Yeah, they're going to work. But the problem with the CAT tourniquet is over a lot of uses, it starts to wrinkle up. It gets actually kind of difficult to thread through the buckle sometimes. And we actually have broken them just from sheer repetition. And usually it's a little piece of nylon that goes through the windlass. That's the part that we've broken. But it's been it takes a long time for us to do that. Now, for instance, in like a soft TW, you could do a lot of practice. The manufacturer doesn't necessarily recommend that you practice with that. But because science is more robust for multiple ruptures than the cap tourniquet is, so you could pull that out, practice with it. And we haven't really had any issues with them not working as well after a lot of uses, with the exception of the clip, because there's a metal clip so you can undo it and redo it if you had to go around the limb and not actually have to thread through a buckle. That clip can actually loosen up. And we've actually had this happen in a lot of scenarios where people go to put it on, it comes apart, and they have a difficult time trying to figure out how to put it back together under stress. Well, and again, that just comes from repetitive uses. There's something like 8 different tourniquets on that list that are approved by the TCCC committee. The CAT Generation 6 and 7 are on there, and there are differences between those two that people should be aware of. You should know which one you're carrying. The SAM XT, it's a windlass style tourniquet similar to a CAT. The soft TW, which is, there's no Velcro on it, it's another windlass style tourniquet. I think it's the TMT, the tactical mechanical tourniquet. It's a windlass style tourniquet. And then there are 2 ratcheting style tourniquets that are on that list now that are approved. The RMT, which is a ratcheting medical tourniquet, and then the TX2 and TX3, which are also ratcheting tourniquets. Now, RMT, the manufacturer, that tells you practice with it as much as you want. They actually tell you you should practice with it. Every time you touch it, you should practice with it. And it's not going to affect its operation in any way, shape, or form. So for tourniquets, it kind of depends. If you have a tourniquet, some tourniquets you can practice with, some you're not supposed to. Bandages, you take a bandage out of the package, you pretty much, I mean, you could roll it back up and put it in a Ziploc bag, but those are really kind of considered one-time uses. So for bandage, combination bandages, we recommend, buy an extra one. They're $7 or $8. Buy another one. That's the one you take out of the package and you put some repetitions in with. And you wouldn't think that, it's a bandage. How complicated can it be, right? Well, there are particular bandages. If you look at, say, Israeli bandages or H bandages, there actually is some technique into using those, and those are not intuitive bandages. You're not going to pop that out of the package and look at it and know exactly how it works. And I see a lot of people that carry Israeli bandages. It's a great bandage, but very few of those people have ever taken one out of the package and actually put it on it. And
that's one of the things I was going to ask about was the Israeli bandage, because when I was building my first kit, just kind of going across the multiple recommendations that are out there, a lot of people are like, the Israeli bandage, like that's the one you get. So, I picked up 2, one for each of my kits, and I wanted to start practicing with it. But, you just kind of get that feeling. It's like once you open up something that's sealed that tight, like, is it unclean now? Like, do you really want to use it? But I've watching the YouTube videos, there's like 30 different ways you can put it on somebody, different parts of the body. So I think that's one you really get the extra one, like you said, so you can practice with it.
For sure. And it's interesting, you say, well, I take it out, is it sterile? It is, but at the point you're going to actually be using this on someone in the field, is anything that we're doing them sterile? Not at all. Everything, the wound is contaminated, the person is contaminated. So, as long as that bandage is clean, it's going to be fine. We just don't want to make anything worse. Don't drop it in the mud and then slap it on, necessarily. We just don't want to make it worse. But
very good. Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, once you take it out in the field, they're already bleeding. They probably already have stuff all over the wound. So stop the bleed first, and then maybe worry about the infection second.
Yeah, that's for the emergency room and the doctors to worry about. Like I say, you don't want to intentionally make it dirtier than you have to.
Right.
Try to stay as clean as you can, but nothing we're doing out there is sterile as far as this type of treatment. So bandages, yeah, you really kind of got to grab an extra one of those to try them out. The only other thing would be like chest seals. And again, once you kind of pop that out of the package, there it is. And you unpeel it. Those are really kind of a one-use item as well. Now, there was not a whole lot of technical expertise required to use. All it is a big sticker. And if you've ever peeled anything off and stuck it on something, you pretty much know how a chest seal is going to work.
Right. Just like any other sticker, once you use it once, you pretty much lost all the usefulness out of it.
And commercial chest seals are extraordinarily sticky. I don't know if you've ever seen like an EE ad or anything like that. but it's like a gel, and they are extraordinarily sticky. So once you peel off and stick it on something, you're done with it. You're not reusing it for anything.
Good. Going back to tourniquets a little bit, you mentioned, what was it, eight different types that are out there. Is there, you said the one you recommend, is there like depending on people's abilities, if they're mainly going to use it maybe just on themselves, if they're only going to use it on somebody else, is there a certain type that's more beneficial than others in different situations? Or is there one that's kind of like this catches all?
Yeah, if I could tell you there was one out of those 8 that was head and shoulders above the rest, I would, but unfortunately there's not. They all have pros and cons, and some of them do things a little better than others, but there ain't a perfect one on there that I have experience with. The ones I've actually put my hands on and practice with and used are the CAT tourniquets, the soft TWs, and then the RMT, the ratcheting medical tourniquet. Between the windlass style tourniquets, I like using my wife. She's like a good tester for me. She actually has some nerve damage in one of her hands. And so, so she has a little bit of a disability. So I kind of like to try these things on her to see, because maybe she might be a little better representation of maybe just the average person with not a lot of, and she can operate the windlass style tourniquets pretty well. She really liked the RMT, that ratcheting medical tourniquet. She was able to operate that ratchet. For her, it was easier than using the windlass. The disadvantage, well, let me we'll just kind of go one by one here. So the CAT tourniquet. Advantages of the CAT tourniquet is if you're applying it to someone else, it goes on really fast. The windlass style tourniquets, you get pretty good leverage with that, with the lever. It has really big clips that catch the windlass. It's easy to secure. Disadvantage of the CAT is between the 6 and 7, there are differences, and there's still plenty of Generation 6s out there. You go buy a brand new and you're pretty much you should be getting the Generation 7. And they made some real improvements from the 6 to the 7. And again, you got to know what you have. The Generation 6 CAT tourniquet, on the buckle, there are 2 slots to the buckle. And when you set it up, you run the strap through one of the slots and you set it up. And if you have to, say you have to apply it one-handed, you put it on your arm, you pull the slack out, attach it, turn the windlass, attach it in the clips. Now, I should also say an advantage of the CAT tourniquet, it's probably the easiest tourniquet to apply one-handed to yourself. The CAT tourniquet works fantastic for that. Now, if, say, I have to apply that Generation 6 CAT tourniquet to a leg, I put it around the leg, but then I have to go through I have the original slot, but then I have to thread it through a second slot and double route that strap through the buckle. And the reason you do that is on a leg, because of the size and circumference, it's going to take a lot more pressure to stop arterial bleeding in a leg than an arm, simply because of anatomy and the arteries are deeper inside the limb. Excuse me. And so that extra pressure, the engineer that designed that Generation 6 CAT tourniquet said, well, if you don't double route that buckle, it could break. And the Army actually did a study a few years ago where they found a 30% failure rate in the field of soldiers misapplying Generation 6 tourniquets, meaning they weren't double routing the buckle when applied to legs. Now, there wasn't a single reported failure, which is good because none of them actually broke. But again, some engineer designed it that way for a reason. So CAT figured, that's a problem. 30%, that's a huge number of misapplications. So they go back and they re-engineer it, and the newest generation, the Gen 7, they've improved a few things on it. They made the clip stronger, the windlass is bigger and stronger, the backer plate is stronger, but most importantly is now it's a single route buckle. So there's one slot to go through, whether you put it on an arm or a leg, and you don't have to remember that it goes on 2 different ways. So those kind of pros and cons of the CAT tourniquet. Now the soft TW, excellent tourniquet for everyday carry and concealed carry, because there's a technique called flat folding. And when you flat fold a soft TTW, it's thinner than a deck of cards almost. And so it's real easy to put a rubber band on and slip in a pocket or attach to your belt, because it takes up hardly any room. The CAT tourniquet, you can't really get that small because the clips are rigid, and they're always going to be about an inch or more because the clips is going to stick out. So the soft TTW is a great tourniquet to carry when you need a low profile. It goes on, if you're applying it to another person, goes on pretty easily. The problem with the soft TTW is when you go to self-apply it, it is an enormous pain in the ass to self-apply to your arm because it can be a little challenging to get the slack out because of the design of the buckle. And they've actually redesigned the buckle on it a couple of times to make that easier. So the newest generation of the soft TW with the improved buckle is the one of those that you want to get a hold of. And it is easier to get the slack out one-handed, but it's still a little challenging. You turn the windlass, you get the windlass in a triangle to secure it, which when you're trying to do it one-handed and this is under a lot of pressure, I've seen people in training drills actually not be able to do it. They have not been able to get that tourniquet secured. So that's not the best one if you have to put it on yourself. The RMT, I've got some repetitions in on that. The rationing style tourniquet, and my only issue with that is that one is really difficult to get the slack out of too if you have to apply it one-handed. They put a little workaround on it. There's a little strap that you actually are supposed to bite with your teeth and hold on to it to pull the slack out. And it does work, but it's still a little difficult to get the slack out of. And my wife had a little difficulty getting the slack out of it as well. But once the slack was out of it, that rationing system actually works pretty well and it's pretty fast. So again, those are the ones that I have personal experience with. And like I say, if I could say one was head and shoulders above the rest, I would tell you. But it seems that the soft TTW seems to be one of the better ones for concealed carry. I haven't tried carrying the RMT yet. It seems to be pretty flat. All of my duty gear, all of my duty gear, I have caps on those. So in the chance I have to apply it to myself, that's the tourniquet that I want for sure. So
yeah. The cat is the one, I think that I have that, and I think it's the Generation 7. It was pretty intuitive. I watched a video on how to do it, put it on my own arm, and like I said, it's pretty intuitive. It wasn't difficult to apply to myself, at least. So I like that, and I don't really carry one on me at all times, but I have one in my bag in my truck, and chances are I'm pretty close to my truck no matter where I'm at. So I might not be carrying it, but at least I can get to it fairly quickly, which is probably not ideal in every situation, but I guess it's better than not having one.
Like I said, it just depends on what you're doing. Do you hunt? Are you a hunter?
I don't hunt. I shoot, but I don't hunt.
So, I usually right around hunting season, I'll usually post something up, to recommend that, if you're out in the field with a gun, you should have a small med kit with you, not in your truck, half a cornfield away. It's not going to do you any good over there. You're out cutting wood, running a chainsaw, you're in your garage with a power saw. I would have something within reach, when you're doing things like that. Those are potentially high risk activities, but we don't think of them like that sometimes.
Right.
And if you're out in the woods with a chainsaw and you don't have a tourniquet, maybe zip tied on it, or with a couple of rubber bands holding it on that chainsaw or in your pocket or on your belt, I think that you should. And we talk about this in the classes I teach, how quickly can a person bleed to death? You sever a major artery or vein, that can happen pretty quickly. And I'll tell you, at least I'll tell you for me personally, I don't care. I don't give a shit how long it takes me to bleed to death. The number that scares me is once you lose between 30 and 40% of your blood volume, now there's not enough oxygen getting your brain anymore. It doesn't work real well. And so once you get to that 30 to 40% blood loss, you can't think straight. And now you're not going to be able to help yourself or anybody else for that matter. And so that's the number that scared me. And there's a few studies I've looked at where, that could potentially happen as quickly as, 60 or 90 seconds. And, if your truck's across the field, how are you really going to make it?
Right.
I'm not sure. So, and every year there's a couple of hunters that die in the field in Nebraska. Every year it happens. So, and sometimes they're preventable.
Continuing our conversation with tourniquets, knowing how tight to apply them is obviously a key factor. Everything you read, everything you see says it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt like a bitch. What's that level? Like, when do you stop turning it?
Well, what do you think? When should you stop?
You would think when the blood stops, right?
No, that's your game.
A couple more twists on it.
blood stops. You've accomplished what you need to accomplish, right? Now something that's going to make that easier, and this is probably the single most common mistake that minimally trained or untrained people make when they apply commercial tourniquets, is they don't get enough slack out. So they start with a loose tourniquet, and now you're going to be turning that windlass forever before it actually starts tightening up. So it's important that when you apply that, you take the slack out. What is you take 3 fingers and try and slide it under the tourniquet. If you can slide 3 fingers under it, it's not tight enough to start with. So you get as much slack out as you can. As soon as you can't fit 3 fingers under it, now you start turning that windlass, and now you're going to have a much quicker effect because it's going to get really tight really fast. And you mentioned it, one of the disadvantages of commercial tourniquets is they can be painful to apply. So if the person you're applying this to is conscious, you need to make sure you explain that to them. If you're going to do something to somebody that hurts, you got to tell them that. I've never lied to a single person in the back of my ambulance. If I'm going to do something to them that hurts, I let them know ahead of time and I explain it to them. We got to do this to save your life and it's going to hurt. Here we go, right? Take a breath. And then you start tightening that and you don't stop until the visible bleeding stops. And it depends on the injury, the anatomy, how big the person is, how tight that's actually going to have to be. And so if you got it as tight as you can physically get it, and the person is still bleeding, maybe you screwed up where you put it. Maybe it's positioned badly. And they're, positioning tourniquets, there's, depending on the situation that you're in. So let's say you're in a hot zone, there's, active danger around you. You go high up and tight on the limb, over the clothing, and you crank it down until the bleeding stops. If it's no immediate threats in the area, and you can expose and fully evaluate the injury and it's localized, you want to go 2 to 3 inches above it and then clamp it down. Now, we never apply over joint. It doesn't work. And we generally, the kind of rule of thumb is to be about a hand's width away, above or below the joint, because even getting too close to the joints can affect the effectiveness of the tourniquet. So maybe you got it in a spot. So if it's not working, loosen it, move it up or down a little bit, readjust it, and then tighten it again and see if it works the second time. And if that's still not working, you can't apply 2 tourniquet limb if you have another tourniquet available. You can go, you want to go right next to it, and if you got room above, you want to generally go above towards the body is where you want to place the second tourniquet at. And if nothing is still working, you can always fall back on just, the basics and direct pressure. Apply firm direct pressure and press as hard as you can until the bleeding stops.
So another thing that I've read is, some sources say it's true, some say it's a myth, but there's a myth out there that as soon as you have a tourniquet, like if you have a tourniquet used on you, or you use a tourniquet on yourself, that limb's gone. Like you're by the time you get to the hospital, they're cutting that off. You're never going to have your arm again.
Right. And I was a long time ago. I think I went through my first EMT class, probably in 91 or 92. And when they taught us about tourniquets, they told us it was absolutely a last resort. And the person's going to lose their arm or their leg after you put that on there. And we were supposed to loosen it every 5 minutes to reperfuse the limb, which was bullshit, and write in blood on their forehead, the time that we applied it. And by the time they were done, I'm like, I'm never going to do that. That's crazy. Why would I even try to do that? It doesn't make any sense. Well, the last almost 20 years we've been at war has proved that all to be crap. None of that was true. So absolutely, we put tourniquets on, you tighten it down, and you leave that tourniquet on, and that tourniquet can stay on for several hours, and that won't be the reason that person loses their arm or their leg. Now, they may have suffered an injury to that limb that's going to cause, later they're going to lose it from, but the tourniquet's not going to be the reason for it.
That's a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah, several hours. Yeah, there's surgeons that use tourniquets in surgery for hours at a time, and that happens every day. And again, so put it on, leave it on, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Another myth is that the only thing that I've heard is the only thing that's going to be effective as a tourniquet is a tourniquet. Some people, they'll say, no, you can't use anything else. You can't use an article of clothing. You can't use a belt. But some people say, yeah, you can. So what's the answer there? What if you don't have a tourniquet? Is there anything else you can do to help alleviate the situation?
Yeah, you can improvise a good tourniquet. In studies, though, when we look at improvised tourniquets, they tend to not work very well because they're not constructed properly. And by its nature, it's improvised. What do I have laying around to use? And you just may not have anything good laying around that's going to fashion a good, effective tourniquet. And so, if I had my choice of materials to improvise a good tourniquet, you need a flexible material that's at least an inch wide. Okay. Now, could I use an extension cord if I had to? I could, but the problem with that narrow material is you're not compressing as much. You're compressing the artery in a very narrow area, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work that well. You want to compress a wider area if necessary, or if possible. The other thing you're doing is that narrow cord is going to probably cause some muscle, nerve, and vascular injury. And now the consequences, this person dies, well, I'm going to cause some nerve, vascular, and muscle damage to stop them from bleeding to death, because that's what I have to do. But if we can avoid that, we want to. So a wide, flexible material. And, can a belt make a good improvised tourniquet? It can, as long as it's flexible enough. A lot of the belts that, if you carry a gun on, you have an actual gun belt that supports the weight of a gun, a magazine, and everything else, it's probably too thick, and it's not going to be flexible enough to be twisted, because for this material to work, you're not going to take a belt and apply it and cinch it like a belt around somebody's arm or leg and ever generate enough pressure to stop an arterial bleed. It's just not going to work that way. You have to put a windlass, some type of rigid piece of material, and then twist the belt to gain mechanical advantage. That's the only way it's going to work. So flexible material, at least an inch wide, secured around the limb, and then you need a windlass to turn and gain mechanical advantage, and you keep twisting that just like you would a commercial tourniquet until the bleeding stops. Now, it's nice to have a way to secure that windlass if you have something else you need to be doing. So you have to try to improvise a way to secure it. And a lot of times, if there's enough of tails hanging off from the original knot you made, sometimes you can knot it up and it'll secure the windlass. Otherwise, you're stuck there holding it. But again, so improvised tourniquets, can they work? They sure can. Do they work in real life? Do they actually work very often? They don't. Now, all it has to do is work good enough, to slow down, to get this person to the hospital. If you look at what happened in the Boston bombing, there was no commercial tourniquets used there because nobody had any. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of improvised tourniquets fashioned that none of them were 100% effective, but they were effective enough to save a lot of people's lives. Now, obviously, if you have a choice, having a commercial tourniquet is going to save you all that trouble. It's going to save you time. You can deploy a cat tourniquet, have bleeding stop, have it secured, and your hands off of it in 20 seconds. That's kind of the goal. That's kind of the standard that we try to get people to, and it's not that hard to meet. Nobody on the planet is going to improvise a tourniquet in 20 seconds that's going to be effective. So
yeah, it's going to take you a while to find the materials laying around.
Right.
I've
that's their plan A. Oh, I'm just going to improvise a tourniquet. Well, no, that's bullshit. That's not plan A. That's plan B.
Yeah, because even before you brought up the 1 inch wide requirement, the minimum 1 inch wide requirement, I was thinking, okay, so if I had a stick, rope, and duct tape, I could probably do something, but I don't, the duct tape would be in one room of the house. I'd have to go outside to go get the rope. I'd have to go somewhere else to get the stick. So that's right. Going to take a lot longer than 20 seconds. And then the rope would damage my nerves probably anyway. So,
but if you're alive, that's okay. And I've seen a number of improvised tourniquets on calls we responded to that worked. They were pretty ugly, but they weren't good enough to keep this person alive till we got there and were able to swap it out for something better. So it can work, but shouldn't be plan A.
If there was absolutely one thing that everybody should have in their trauma kit, what would that one item be?
Well, a trauma kit by nature wouldn't be one item. So it's a kit for the one thing in it. And I think I said it earlier, if there's one thing that's more important than anything, it's not a piece of gear, it's getting some training.
Exactly.
Because to control bleeding, you don't always need a tourniquet to control bleeding. You can just take your two hands and apply direct pressure and control a bleeding that way. And frankly, I've been a paramedic, over several decades, and that's the primary technique that I've used as a paramedic to control massive bleeding has simply been good direct pressure. Now, if you never had to actually take your two hands and put them on another human being and stop massive bleeding, it's probably going to take more pressure than you think to do that. And the disadvantage of direct pressure is it can wear you out because, like I say, it takes some effort. And so that's just something to consider. That's the advantage of a tourniquet is once you put it on, you can take your hands off and it's doing the work for you. But very often, again, if you just exert enough effort, just your two hands, you can stop a lot and control a lot of bleeding just that way.
That's good enough.
And again, training. And like I say, that the most important thing, I would say, take a class, even if it's just a 90-minute stop the bleed class, which those are generally free. And that's a federally run program that came from the Hartford Consensus, which was a committee formed to try to improve the survivability of civilians in active killer incidences. And one of the recommendations is, well, we got to train the public, what to do, because everybody can be a rescuer and anybody can save a life. And that's what that program does. In 90 minutes, an hour and a half, they're going to teach you how to keep somebody from bleeding to death in front of you. And that should never happen. Nobody should ever die of uncontrolled bleeding.
Yeah, and a lot of people probably just associate this with gunshot wounds, but think about the times of you witnessed a car accident or just, any sort of accident where there's, a massive bleed, like somebody hurts their finger and there's blood gushing from their hand. Just knowing that stuff is a good thing to know.
And I tell people in class, at 88 Tactical, we've got over 90 different types of classes that we teach there. And if we had to really put them in a hierarchy of skills that you're most likely to use at some point in your life, tactical medicine is at the top. Because I promise you, at some point in every person's life, you're probably in a position where you could render aid to somebody, or you could stand around wondering what to do. Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right. It's probably not going to be a gunshot wound. It's not going to be an active killer incident. It's going to be a motorcycle crashing in front of you, or your child running through a plate glass door with their arm or something. It's going to be things like that if you don't know what to do, that person may die right in front of you. And over almost 190,000 people die every year in the United States, from trauma. And depending on what study you reference, they say between 5 and 15% of those deaths actually could have been prevented if someone was there that had some basic skills and the will to step in and do something. And you put a number to that, that's a lot of deaths, or a lot of needless deaths.
Very good advice. Last question I have for you. Hopefully this is kind of a fun one, but when you're looking for trauma kits, and I've mentioned this a couple times, you just go online. Everybody has a different, there's some basic things. Everybody has like the tourniquet, but there's, everybody has their special list of things. What is one thing that you commonly see that gets included in a trauma kit that just drives you nuts?
Well, there's actually probably a couple of things. Any kit that has a rat's tourniquet in it, you can take that out, throw it in the trash, keep the rest of the kit, throw that tourniquet in the trash. It's not a tourniquet. Use it to hold up the shitty exhaust on your car or something. It's not for putting on people. The other thing is I will see people that have kits that they'll actually have some advanced medical equipment in there that they have no idea how to use. For instance, I've seen people carrying chest needles, chest darts, some crite kits and things like that. That's the type of stuff for advanced medical providers. That's not for the average Joe to be, stabbing needles in people's chests, thinking they're treating a tension pneumothorax. And some of the people I've talked to, they're like, well, I have no intention of using this. I'm just going to hand it to somebody that if someone shows up that knows how to use it, I'll give it to them.
Is there a doctor at the site?
Sketchy too,
I've got the tools for you.
Now, it's interesting you say doctor because, we have doctors on scene sometimes. We show up and there's someone that's a doctor there. What do you think, if someone runs up to you and says they're a doctor, what do you think the first question you should ask them is?
Like a medical doctor?
What kind of doctor are you?
Yeah.
We've had the gambit, from, podiatrists to, doctors of philosophy. And, and it may be decades since any of those people have seen the inside of an emergency room. So just because someone says they're a doctor or even a nurse doesn't mean that they really have any training whatsoever, recent training when it comes to traumatic injuries. And I've heard some people that have been on scenes and actually got some really bad advice from bystanders. I got a friend, he's a police officer here in Omaha, and he was in Sturgis recently, and a group of motorcycles in front of them, a tire came off an oncoming car and hit a motorcyclist. The tire did. Lays down his motorcycle, just wads his leg up terribly. And so they stop. My buddy's got his med kit with him on his motorcycle. He grabs it, starts to put a tourniquet on this guy's leg that's bleeding massively. And a guy runs up to him with a fire department shirt on and says, "No, you can't put that on there. He's going to lose his leg." And he's like, he's going to lose his leg anyway because it's mush.
Right.
And don't do this. He's going to die. So it's interesting. You get people that'll run up that don't have any recent training or knowledge. They're going to maybe try to give you advice. So that's where training helps you also. It's going to give you the confidence to know that what you're doing is you're doing the right thing.
Okay, so I lied. I have one more question.
Sure.
That's okay with you. Is it possible, I mean, you have your base items that you want to have in your trauma kit. I know there's some people out here like me, like I'm the guy who's always thinking, like just constantly trying to make things better or trying to make things more accommodating towards my life, or you know what I mean? Is it possible to tailor the items of your kit towards your everyday life? And the only reason I was asking this is because, when I was doing my initial research, everything was like, include a splint. And I'm like, well, I don't really go out and do that much out in the woods. I don't, if I'm going to break my leg, chances are it's going to be like a car accident in the city where an ambulance is going to come up, if I need a splint or break my arm or something like that. So I don't have a splint in my kit. Maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me if I'm wrong for not having a splint in my kit. If I go out camping or something, I'll get a splint. But, is it feasible or logical to tailor what's in your kit based off of your lifestyle?
Absolutely. And like I say, I think you kind of almost answered your own question. It's like, what am I doing? Where am I going? How far away am I going to be from a hospital? And how far away am I going to be from any type of medical care? And that's going to kind of put you in a direction. It's like, now I might need a couple of SAM splits, if I'm going to be out in the middle of Colorado up in the Rockies and something like that. But driving around town, do you need a bunch of SAM splits in your car? I don't think so. All right. And that's the thing, living in an urban environment, there's advantages to living in an urban environment with a professional fire department, and professional EMS responders. They're, within, 3 minutes, generally, we're going to be at your side providing medical care. Now, that doesn't mean, within that 3 minutes, that's why we do tactical medical training, because within that 3 minutes, what can bystanders be doing to keep this person alive before we get there? Because that person could die in 3 minutes if they're bleeding to death before we get there. But if it's a broken ankle or something like that, we're going to be there. We're going to be able to take care of it. All you got to be is kind of mental support for that person, right? Keep them calm, moving around. Pros are coming. Now, like you say, you're out in the middle of nowhere. Things change a little bit. And wilderness medicine is an entire discipline unto itself. And I'm not an expert in wilderness medicine, but I can tell you that, you're somebody that does hike a lot or things like that. I would recommend a little different kit for a person like that. So your lifestyle, where you go, what you do, how far away from professional care are you? And I can tell you that even, is it going to be a volunteer? Or do you live in an area where it's a volunteer department versus a professional department? And I'm not bagging on volunteers. God bless them for what they do. I'd never do that job for free. But they are not going to be able to respond as quickly as a professional fire department.
If the guys working to get to the station first.
Exactly. Guy's working at an auto body shop. He's got to go to the station. They got to get the vehicles and respond. Professional guys ready to go. So time. So that can make a difference also. Sometimes those are things that people don't think about.
Awesome. Well, sorry. That's just like, I like to play devil's advocate. Every time someone tells me I need something, I'm just kind of like that guy who's like, but do I? Like,
right.
Chances are I probably do, but I question everything. It just pisses people off, but I had to ask.
If I can't give you a reason for why you need it, you probably don't.
Awesome. Well, that's all I have for this episode. Thanks again for coming on. If you want people to reach out to you, get a hold of you, contact you for training, what are a couple ways that you would prefer people to do that?
Yeah, they can. My email is just swhittington, swhittington at the number 88tactical.com. They can hit me up. I check that email all the time. You can probably catch me on Facebook and things like that. It's just Shawn Whittington Jr. on Facebook. And yeah, if anybody, like I say, any of the listeners have any questions about gear, training, I encourage them to hit me up, and I'll help them out any way I can.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And hopefully we can get you back on the show to talk a little bit more.